Welcome to KW Conversations, where we discuss the workforce and education issues that matter in the Louisville region. This show is brought to you by Kentuckiana Works, the region's Workforce Development Board.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to KW Conversations, where we address the region's workforce and education issues. I'm here today with Sarah Ehresman, the Director for Labor Market Intelligence for Kentuckiana Works. How are you doing today, Sarah?
Hey, Patrick. I'm doing well. Thanks.
So can you tell listeners a little bit about what you do at Kentuckiana Works?
Absolutely. So as the Director of Labor Market Intelligence, I try to help create information products to get to students and job seekers so that they can understand what's going on in the economy. We produce data showing the types of jobs that are growing, the wages associated with them, and the types of education and skills that you need to be successful in those jobs. And so we try to get data into the hands of people that are making decisions about their career paths and provide them with data so that they can make smart, informed choices.
Okay, cool. And before we jump into the news of the day, listeners can find a lot of your research and labor market information at kentuckianaworks.org/LMI. So I want to make sure people know that. Okay, so let's just jump into the news. There was some somewhat surprising news on the unemployment rate for June in Kentucky. Can you talk a little bit about what that data shows and what your takeaway is from that data?
Yes, absolutely. So the unemployment rate for Kentucky in June came in at 4.3%. This was much lower than most people had expected. It's far lower than the national rate of 11.1%, and actually the lowest among all states. And so at first glance, this sounds like really good news. The unemployment rate has fallen a dramatic 12 points from April's peak. But this is where it's important to understand what the unemployment rate actually tells us and how the pandemic environment impacts it. So there are a couple of conditions that have to be met for someone to be counted as unemployed. First, the most obvious, a person didn't have a job during the survey's reference week. So that's the week containing the 12th of the month. They also have to be available for work, so we're not going to count inmates or other people who are otherwise not available for work. But the third condition to be counted as unemployed is that the person either looked for work in the previous month or that they were on a temporary layoff with an expectation to be recalled by their employer. So it's that last condition that has been particularly disrupted by the pandemic. If someone did not actively look for a job because of health concerns, a lack of childcare, or other reasons, they wouldn't be counted as unemployed. In addition, if someone was temporarily laid off, but then they learned it had become a permanent layoff and they did not look for a job, they also would not be counted as unemployed. So this sort of statistical artifact is sort of causing some disruption to the unemployment rate. So when someone does not have a job, but is also not looking for work, they're not counted as unemployed, they're counted as not being in the labor force. And so people drop out of the labor force for perfectly valid reasons all of the time. They might retire, they choose to stay home to take care of children, or maybe they're in school. And so these people are taken out of the equation altogether when it comes to calculating that unemployment rate. But between May and June, nearly 110,000 Kentuckians went from being unemployed to being not in the labor force. And so the decline in the state's unemployment rate was primarily driven by an overall decline in the labor force, and not because unemployed workers found jobs. In fact, if the size of the labor force had remained constant between May and June, the state's unemployment rate would have been 9.5%, so much higher than that recorded 4.3%. And so we would expect, and in fact we hope, that many of these workers will re-enter the labor force and begin looking for work. And when this happens, the unemployment rate is very likely to come back up because it might take some time for those workers that have been displaced to find new jobs and reconnect with an employer.
So basically what you're saying is that people have dropped out of the labor force according to this statistic, according to this measurement, and that's caused kind of a little bit of a misleading major drop in the unemployment rate. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. Because when we see this decline in the unemployment rate, we want it to be because unemployed workers are finding jobs. They're reconnecting with a job, with an employer. But in fact, what's happening is they still don't have a job. They just happen to not be classified as unemployed because they didn't look for a job.
Okay. And your expectation is that we're likely to see this unemployment rate tick back up some over the coming months, based on where the economy is at.
Yeah, that's right. So as people begin to start looking for work again, as sort of we get the virus under control and childcare issues are resolved, and people start to look for work again, then the unemployment rate might come back up because all of those people are now counted as unemployed again instead of not being in the labor force. So right now they're not even in the equation at all, but we want them to be in the labor force. We want them to reconnect with an employer. But it might take them some time to find a new job, to find an employer that's hiring in the place that they live. And so that disconnect, that time that it takes them to find a new job could lead to some months where the unemployment rate kind of shoots back up to some of these record highs that we saw in April and May.
Okay. Interesting. So as someone that spends a lot of time with this kind of data, how important is the unemployment rate in assessing kind of the overall health of the economy? From your perspective?
It's typically very important. I mean, we really do want to keep a handle on the number of people who are looking for a job that don't have one. And so we regularly track that to sort of understand the health of the labor market. But in this pandemic environment, people are less likely to be looking for work at this point in time because of health concerns, because childcare facilities are closed, and because they do have this safety net provided by the federal government in the form of expanded unemployment insurance benefits. And with those set to expire, well, really they've already expired in Kentucky, then they no longer are going to have that safety net, which will really force people to begin to look for work in a more active way. However, the virus is still not under control. The childcare situation has not yet been resolved. So we're really putting workers in a difficult position when it comes to reconciling sort of the economic environment that they have found themselves in.
Right. So, and when these unemployment rates come out, there's about a month lag on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And right now, that's really difficult for the rate of change that we're seeing in this, economy right now. So it's already the end of July, and this data reflects the economic conditions as of the middle of June. And so normally that would be fine. The economy doesn't really change that quickly, that often. But what we're seeing now in this pandemic environment is, a month is just kind of a lifetime in economic terms. We're already seeing some states rolling back their reopenings. We've also in Kentucky, had to reclose the bars and reduce capacity at restaurants. And this is going to affect workers. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's covered, I think, the basics of what we wanted to talk about today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about the unemployment rate or kind of any related information about that before we hop off?
Just a reminder that the unemployment rate is just a monthly snapshot of that week, that reference week in a given month, and so we do often see sort of wide fluctuations on a month-to-month basis, and I think we can expect a bumpy road ahead for the state's unemployment rate.
Okay. Well, just as another reminder, you can find in-depth labor market research, resources for job seekers and employers, and much more at KentuckianaWorks.org. Thanks, Sarah, for talking to us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to KW Conversations. Visit KentuckianaWorks.org to find labor market data, resources for job seekers and employers, and much more.